Welcome to Capital Link's Trending News podcast series. In this series, we speak with Navigator Gas about their recent inclusion in the Russell 2000 and 3000 US stock market indices. I'm Nicolas Bornozis of Capital Link, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Randy Giveans, Executive Vice President of Investor Relations and Business Development at Navigator Gas. Now, our discussion is going to focus on the implications for a company and its shareholders to be part of a US stock market index and how it works. Now, while our discussion is going to focus more specifically on Navigator Gas, it will still provide insight into the broader picture regarding the significance of indices when it comes to investing. By the way, as a reminder, as you all know, before joining Navigator Gas, Randy was the head of maritime research at Jefferies. So in that capacity, as a head analyst, he had the opportunity to interact with both investors and companies for a very long period of time, and therefore he has deep knowledge and unique perspective on the topic that we will discuss today. A quick reminder that this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice. And as an additional disclosure, we are privileged at Capital Link to work with Navigator Gas on investor relations. You can read the full disclosure on the slide. Now, Navigator Gas is listed on the New York Stock Exchange under the ticker symbol NVGS. The company owns and operates the world's largest fleet of handy-sized liquefied gas carriers and is a global leader in the seaborne transportation of petrochemical gases such as ethylene, ethane, liquefied petroleum gas, and ammonia. And by the way, Navigator also holds a 50% interest through a joint venture in an ethylene export marine terminal at Morgan's Point in Texas. So let's begin our discussion. Randy, thank you very much for joining us. And let me ask you the first question. As of June 30, Navigator Gas joined the broad US market Russell 3000 index and the small cap Russell 2000 index. Now, based on your company's announcement, this has been heralded as a major positive step that can help expand your shareholder base and your trading liquidity. So let's now delve into this. The first question is, let's talk about the Russell indices. How do they work? How are they constructed? And what is the difference between 2000 and 3000?
Great. Yeah. Hey, thanks so much, Nicholas. Always enjoy our chats. So appreciate the invite here. Breaking down the Russell, various indices. So first, the Russell 1000, 2000, 3000, they're all indices that track different segments of the broader US stock market, and it's all based on market capitalization. So the Russell 1000 is the large cap subset of the Russell 3000. It includes the 1,000 largest companies. So you can think of AT&T, Apple, Tesla, what have you. The Russell 2000 is the small cap subset of those 3,000, representing the 2,000 smallest companies after the Russell 1000. So companies 1,001 to 3,000. So in summary, the Russell 1000 really focuses on those large cap stocks. The Russell 2000 is the small cap stocks, and the Russell 3000 encompasses the entire market. So if you're included in the Russell 1000 or the Russell 2000, you automatically get inclusion in the larger Russell 3000.
So what are the eligibility criteria for a company to be included in these indices? Is it only quantitative like market cap, or are they also other elements?
Yeah, no, there's some qualitative as well as quantitative, right? So first, Russell looks at your home country indicators, right? The HCI. So they look at your country of headquarters, your country of incorporation, the country of your most liquid exchange, and that's based on your average daily trading volume. Navigator, we've been listed on the New York Stock Exchange for more than 11 years now, and all of our daily trading volume happens on the NYSE. So once the United States kind of applies to one of those three, they then look at your primary location of assets or revenue, which also must match that kind of home country indicator. So in terms of assets, we have a Houston office, so a U.S. office here in Houston. We have a U.S. onshore energy infrastructure asset. with that ethylene export terminal that you alluded to in the introduction over at Morgan's Point, just outside of Houston here in Texas. And then in terms of revenue, the majority of our revenue is generated from activities here in the US. Now, other criteria, right? They include a share price greater than $1. They don't want, penny stocks in there. A market cap greater than $30 million, and you have to obviously be ranked in the top 3,000 companies. We're well ahead of that with a market cap over $1 billion. Free float certainly has to be more than 5% of shares outstanding, so a pretty low bar there. And then the average daily trading volume also must exceed the global median. In 2024, that global median was around 125, 130,000 a day. So again, we are well above that.
So, Randy, based on what you described, because we have a number of global shipping companies that are not included in the index, I guess one of the main criteria in your case is the fact that we have a big US component in terms of presence and revenue.
Correct. Yeah.
So now let's go to the next question. Why is inclusion in an index, and specifically the Russell Index, significant for a company like Navigator Holdings?
Yeah, the Russell 2000 is certainly the premier small cap index. It's widely used by investment managers, institutional investors, hedge funds as the basis for both index funds as well as the benchmark for various investment strategies. So to date, there's around $2 trillion with a T dollars in passively kind of tracked via funds such as ETFs that replicate the Russell 2000 and the Russell benchmarks, all of them, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. For the Russell 2000, the biggest of which is ticker IWM, right? That is a exchange traded fund, matches the Russell 2000, and approximately $11 trillion here in the US and $16 trillion globally are benchmarked against that Russell, the Russell indices. And that includes the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. So there's a large amount of money that is directly tied to these indices. And there's a much larger amount of money that is benchmarked against these indices, right? So it not only brings Navigator Gas more exposure and a larger pool of investors, it also brings direct investment dollars into NVGS shares.
So, Randy, when it comes to indexing, we have both passive indexing, replicating an index, and we also have active indexing, tilting the weightings in the index. How does this work, and how does it benefit the overall trading liquidity and
So in the simplest terms, the passive funds try to match the returns of the benchmark indices, like the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, or in this case, the Russell 2000. So to do this, these passive funds match both the components as well as the weightings of the underlying index, right? Their job is to match the performance of the various the indices that they are tracking. In terms of the active funds, those are benchmarked against an underlying index, and usually they're mandated to invest in companies that are components of that index, but they can adjust the weightings meaningfully, and that's in order to outperform the underlying index. So they're trying to pick the best of the S&P 500, the best of the NASDAQ, the best of the Russell 2000. So an active fund that's benchmarked against the Russell 2000, for example, they might only own shares in a few hundred companies, maybe even fewer, right? Certainly not all 2,000 companies. So that's an actively managed fund. They're trying to pick the best in class within that mandated kind of umbrella of the component companies. In terms of the actual trading liquidity, right, there's a reconstitution day, which happens annually in the Russell 2000. And then there's quarterly rebalancing days, right? So every quarter, they will buy and sell to match the weightings. But then above and beyond that, when it comes to the active funds, they're getting in and out of the names much more frequently, and they don't have to do it on a quarterly basis, right? So then you see more trading liquidity on that front.
So being part of an index, it means that it brings investment dollars into the company, and then it helps liquidity. But this has to do with those who are following the index passively or actively. How does this help or what is the impact on the fundamental investors who invest into a company based on stock picking that they want to invest in the particular company.
Yeah.
What is the impact on them?
Yep. So with that, they're now able to invest. So I've had many teach-ins over the last few years. I joined in April 2022. Of okay, why did you join Navigator Gas? Tell us more about it. NVGS. So going into that, many funds who are benchmarked against the Russell say, look, we like the story, but we really are required to invest in companies that are within the index. So now that we are part of that index, they can then, they're allowed to invest in a company like Navigator Gas. So in terms of some of the timeline as well as kind of what's happening with the shareholder base, I did have a quick chart here I can show. Let me see if I can share my screen. Um, and it'll kind of a picture's worth 1,000 words. So I'll be able to explain some of this in further detail. So again, back on May 23rd, that's when it was announced that we would be added to the Russell 2000 and 3000, right? That's when the active managers can start to position and rebalance their portfolios to match that upcoming kind of rebalancing that's happening on June 27th. So it happened again about a month later. It was the actual reconstitution day. And this is when all the passively managed funds, they match the weightings of the Russell index, right? So on that day, looking at June 27th, 4.5 million shares of Navigator Gas traded hands. And you can see this massive spike here on June 27th. But what happened is the hedge funds, they start buying in late May, and that's to build positions to then sell to those passive funds on the reconstitution day. That provides the liquidity to the indexers, right? Some funds also sold short. We saw that our short interest jumped on that Friday the 27th. So there has been some incremental buying throughout July to cover some of those short positions. So you can see here, May 23rd, when it was announced, that was kind of the bottom. And you started to see some increased share price activity, and you certainly saw some increased trading liquidity. It's hard to see on this exact scale, but clearly this section is a lot higher than it's been for any 2-month period before this, right? So we saw a share price improvement as well as a increased trading liquidity since May 23rd. Now, when it comes to the shareholder base, I think we're going to touch on liquidity a little more later, but for the expanded shareholder base, many new funds, right, have reached out in the last, I don't know, 2 months or so, letting me know they're now shareholders, and we won't really see that full impact until mid-August. That's when these funds are required to file their 13Fs, and that is kind of when they disclose their holdings as of June 30th. So again, we should see a lot more new names on our shareholder registry come mid-August when those updated 13Fs are filed.
I think summing it up, we can say that clearly the benefits for everybody, including the fundamental investors, is bigger visibility and bigger liquidity. So you said that you wanted to share some more insight in liquidity regarding
Yes,
liquidity.
just touching on that liquidity, and our daily trading liquidity certainly is increasing. Now it's averaging over coming up on $6 million per day. And it's really increased significantly over the past 5 years, call it, but most meaningfully over the past 3 years. And you can see that in the table in the bottom right there. So there was a big step up, obviously, over the last 2 months, which I just kind of highlighted from the Russell 2000 inclusion announcement in May 23rd, and then since then, the buying as a result. So the increased trading liquidity is happening despite us buying back 3.8 million shares, around $50 million in 2023, and then another 3.5 million shares in 2024. So even though our number of shares and the free float has decreased since 2022, our daily trading liquidity has meaningfully increased, right? And this has been caused by a real combination of factors in recent years, but the Russell 2000 has certainly added to this in recent months. And you can see there on the chart on the left, as well as in the table on the right, just the share price appreciation, but also on the trading liquidity. Thus far in 2025, we're averaging almost 400,000 shares traded per day, totaling almost $6 million per day. And there's been many trading days that we've been above $10 million per day. So that is a stark improvement, as you can see in that table, over recent years when average daily trading liquidity was maybe 1, 2, last year 3 million. Now we're almost double that to $5.5 to $6 million per day.
Randy, thank you very much. This has been a very interesting discussion. It's a major positive development for the company, so congratulations. Any closing remarks you would like to make before we conclude?
Yeah, no, it's been a great last few months, right? In terms of feedback on this, the reaction has been very positively. We've had a flurry of kind of inbounds from investors when we were added to the additions list back in late May, and then again after we were officially added in late June, we put out a press release and everything. So it's been positive. Doing a lot of teach-ins in recent weeks, so it's been nice to see the uptick in both our trading liquidity and more importantly, frankly, on the share price over the past few months. So. Now it's just time to deliver on a lot of our recent announcements and news. So the best is yet to come for Navigator Gas. So we're excited.
Randy, thank you very much. So we had the opportunity to discuss with Mr. Randy Giveans, the Executive Vice President of Investor Relations and Business Development of Navigator Gas. Randy, thank you for being with us. And this webinar will be available for access upon demand on Capital Link's YouTube channel and on capitalinkwebinars.com. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.